Hello and welcome to this video in where I show you the differences between boosts, overdrives, distortions and fuzz pedals. So first of all, a little disclaimer here, this is just the general approach on what the difference is, but beware, there are lots of hybrid pedals that are not really only distortion pedals, for instance, and not only fuzz pedals. They're some kind of hybrid. So let's start with a rather technical view on the differences. First of all, boost pedals. We have here the Routerberg Inside. It's a brand new boost pedal that was provided to me by Routerberg, and you can really see what a boost pedal does. A boost pedal simply boosts the volume. There is no clipping involved. So when you activate it, the signal simply gets louder and you can adjust the amount of loudness to taste. Of course, there are also boost pedals that have way more options. For instance, the P-Pass pedals Dirty Tree, which does have an EQ section, and with the EQ you can also alter the sound, but in general the boost makes it louder. Let's continue with overdrive pedals. An overdrive pedal, for instance, the Boss Super Overdrive, is a pedal that distorts your signal, and it distorts it by using soft clipping. Soft clipping means that the signal is clipped. Basically the transients are basically cut off. The sine wave isn't exactly sine anymore, it's cut. And with the drive control you can basically select the amount of cutting and the amount of soft clipping. As you can also see, an overdrive pedal doesn't boost your signal by default, but maybe some overdrive pedals do have huge volume reserves. The Boss Super Overdrive obviously isn't one of them. Again, there are lots of pedals that have way more options. For instance, the Lichtlärm King in Yellow, it has a couple different clipping options, and it has a 4-band EQ where you can shape the sound more to your liking, and you can easily go into distortion realms. With distortion pedals such as the Boss DS1, it's called Distortion, you switch from soft clipping that the overdrive pedals have to hard clipping. Hard clipping basically means that the sine wave is cut off even more drastic, and it, well, produces a harsher sound, and it feels like it has more volume, but that's not always the case, and that's the huge difference to overdrive pedals. Last but not least, we have fuzz pedals, such as the Nine of Swords Tyrant, and fuzz pedals are the extremer version of a distortion pedal. The hard clipping is even more extreme, and as you can see, the curve now looks like a square, and it's very harsh, very distorted sounding, and well, again, with more options you get more tools to shape the tone to your liking, but you can basically say a fuzz pedal is the more extreme version of a distortion pedal. Since the clipping is so hard, fuzz pedals almost always make you at least feel that the sound is way louder than without them. So now, after those explanations, I want to show you how you can actually use the 4 types of pedals in a musical context, and since we're playing metal here, I will show you in a metal context. A disclaimer here as well, you can also stack your pedals. For instance, you can stack an overdrive with a distortion or whatever to get even more options, but I won't show you this here. Here I simply show you basically 2 approaches for the different types of pedals. My signal chain for this is always the same. We have my Iones Cetius custom guitar, and it's a 7-string in standard tuning. From there we go into 2 pedals of the same style, so 2 boost pedals, 2 overdrive pedals, 2 distortion pedals, or 2 fuzz pedals, to show you a bit of variety basically. From there we go into my Routerberg Trigger 30 amplifier, and I've basically dialed in a really standard clean sound and a standard distorted sound to show you the different approaches you can have. From there we go into a load box, and then we go into an IR from D-Night Audio. There's a secret code in the description. And I've selected the Fredman Goodness from their Holy Grail Musicians pack. So first of all, here's the clean sound. And now we'll basically just activate the Routerberg inside, and then you basically will hear what the boost does. So as you can hear, the signal distorts, although the inside isn't a distortion and it just boosts the signal. But that's due to the fact that the guitar signal gets actually boosted, and then the boosted signal will hit the preamp of the Routerberg, and the preamp will actually clip. And that's because of the inside, but the inside itself, the boost pedal itself, doesn't clip. Just the preamp section of the amp, and therefore it sounds boosted. If I would run it in the FX loop, I could actually get a clean boost. A really clean boost that would sound clean. So with the Dirty Tree, we do have some EQ options, and I can shape the sound more to my liking and just listen to when the signal will actually clip and how the EQ sections actually affect the sound. So due to the EQ section of the Dirty Tree, you can actually set the amount of high frequencies and low frequencies that you want to boost, and therefore the amount of high frequencies and low frequencies that will get clipped when you run into the preamp. This is not the ideal approach to use a boost pedal. You typically want to use a boost pedal in front of a distorted amp because you do want the preamp to clip. However, not the clean preamp, the distorted preamp, and that's what we're doing right now. So here's the distorted channel of the Routerberg. And now let's activate the inside and see what this pedal actually does with the preamp. So as with a clean preamp, it actually introduces more gain and we got a tighter sound. This can even be more extreme when we have the Dirty Tree with its EQ settings, and when we dial back some bass, add some treble, we get a really nasty sound. And we've also a DT setting that cuts the frequencies even more. So as a verdict for the boost pedals, I would use a boost pedal in front of an already distorted amp if I like the distortion at all and I simply want to have more and the amp can't deliver. So for the overdrive pedals, again, we are using the clean amp, and here we can hear, or you should hear, how the overdrive delivers a tube-like distortion, because tube amps, the power amp section, when you run them at very high volume, also introduce very soft clipping, and that's what overdrive pedals typically want to mimic. Very classic example on how to use an overdrive. With more options come more options. The king in yellow, let's actually see what we can achieve with this pedal. And here we're right in the realm of the crossing between overdrive and distortion, because it's really good distorted sound. With the EQ section you do have more options. If you want to see what the King in Yellow does, watch the review of this pedal. And without further ado, let's head over to the distorted amp. So overdrives are, at least in a metal context, really often combined with heavy distorted amps because of their behavior. We basically use them as a boost pedal, and well, it goes basically back in time when there really wasn't a boost pedal. So we mimicked it with overdrive pedals. And the very typical approach to this is that you crank the volume, set the drive on 0 and set tune to taste. And this also adds more gain. You can also play with the drive. I really like my drive at around 9 o'clock to get some more gain. And due to the circuitry of most overdrive pedals, especially the Super Overdrive and the Tube Screamer, you cut off some low frequencies and you get a tighter sound that sounds more metal. So let's try this. So, as you could hear, more gain and tighter. With the King in Yellow we can get more extreme sound because of the more options we have. So in a metal context, at least in front of a distorted amp, there really is no big difference for overdrives and boost pedals, at least in my opinion. I always think about overdrives being the little dirty boost, if I want to have a dirty boost, and boost pedals when I want to have a really clean signal. So with distorted pedals, you can use them two ways, at least I use them two ways. The first way is where basically everyone uses them in front of a clean amp, and here you use them to add an additional channel to your amp if you're not happy with the distortion the amp has, or if you want to have another flavor. Well, let's start with the DS1 and then the other pedal. As you could hear, the sound is drastically altered. There is no resemblance of the clean amp here anymore, whereas in the overdrive you could hear how the clean amp sounded. You do have lots of different distortion pedals with lots of different options, and I chose the Boss HM2, well, Let's find out how this sounds. So the typical approach for distortion pedals, another distortion flavor. However, you can also misuse them as boosts or overdrives in front of your distorted amp and get even more unique flavors. And let me show you this. So with the distorted amp, you really have to be careful not to add too much gain. So I basically start by setting gain at 0. And you also have to be careful not to add too much volume, because otherwise you get some pumping effects you don't really want to have. However, with those two pedals, it's safe to crank them. And let's do this. So here you could really hear that when you use the distortion pedals, you're mostly opting for the different EQ options it has. When I crank the tone, I get this really nice sound that resembles the Boss HM2 actually, which we're gonna try after this. And you don't really want the clipping section. It's cool to have, and you will add a tiny bit, but most of the time, if you use a distortion pedal in front of the amp, you just want the EQ with this extra little bit of distortion it has. So you're usually letting the distortion really low. So, HM2. Now I, of course, dialed in the infamous HM2 chainsaw sound. I really love to use distortion pedals in front of already distorted amps. However, you shouldn't underestimate the use as an additional channel. You get some nice unique flavors that you can even shape more with the amp's EQ section when you're using it in front of a clean amp. With fuzz pedals, you actually don't want to have an amp that's clipping at all by itself, so you really want to have a pristine, clean sound that stays clean even at high volumes. You want the full distortion from your fuzz pedal to get really disgusting, annoying, dirty sounds. And well, I will do my best to show you with the 9 of Swords Tyrant. It's a one-knob pedal, and I can't do much wrong, except dialing in the amp badly. But since it's the same sounds for every pedal, well, I guess it has to show how good it works. So, as you could hear, fuzz pedals drastically alter the sound, and they also introduce huge amounts of low end, well, most of them. So it would be cool to have more options. Gladly we have the Behringer Super Fuzz, or I have it. And here we have a couple more fuzz options that I'm going to show you how will they sound in front of a clean amp and how you might actually want to use them. So as you could hear, the sound is really broken sometimes, almost sounded like a bit crusher, and that's exactly what you want to have when you use a fuzz pedal. However, I like to use fuzz pedals as boosts, and this doesn't work all the time. Actually, it doesn't work most of the time, as I can show you here, the Tyrant as a boost pedal. Just noisy and sounds almost exactly like in front of the clean channel. So that's why I don't use this one, but some fuzz pedals sound really good in front of a distorted amp. Most of the time it has to do with their EQ section, when you can crank the treble or you can crank the bass. Well, just sounds good. So let's try this with the Super Fuzz. Not the best sound at all, but a fun way to use it is to blend this disgusting sound with a really nice modern distorted sound, and you get a really unique flavor. That's basically two approaches that you would use, or that I would use fuzz pedals in front of a clean amp as a totally unexpected harsh sound, or in front of a driven amp sometimes to get a nice blendable secondary sound to blend in with my main distortion sound, just a tiny bit. And there we have it. Those are the, at least in my opinion, differences between boosts, overdrives, distortion and fuzz pedals. I hope I didn't tell you total bullshit. I hope at least 70% were true, or at least 70% were helpful. But let me know down in the comment section if I succeeded or if I failed miserably. And if I failed, let me know what I can do better. I want to learn, trust me. If you want to support this channel, check out the links in the description or consider becoming a YouTube member. This would help quite a bit. And with this being said, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. May the power protect you and have a nice day.